Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning. And today my guest is Patrick Smith, who is a guitar player, guitarist, I guess we should call it, in the Washington, D.C. area. He's a longtime student of the Alexander Technique and has blogged extensively about his learning experiences with the technique. He has performed with the ODD Camp, the Solaris Guitar Trio, Fingerpoint, and he's performed as a soloist. He's worked for dance, has been performed in New York, Richmond, Philadelphia, and the JFK Center in Washington, D.C. And we're going to talk today about Patrick's use of negative directions, negative Alexander Technique directions. I've had a number of conversations with teachers on that topic, and we're going to talk today about how Patrick has experimented with using negative directions in ways that might seem a little surprising to Alexander Technique teachers and students. So, Patrick, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's nice to be back again.
It's good talking to you again. Well, I'm not going to make you define the Alexander Technique.
Thank you.
Maybe it would be good if we both gave our takes on very briefly, our takes on negative directions. If you'd like to go first on that.
Okay. Well, I was introduced to the idea from your podcast and just played with it a couple days and then forgot about it and then stumbled onto another podcast, and that's when negative directions are basically saying I am not holding on to my neck or myself or not compressing, those types of things. Instead of the traditional may my neck be free in such a way, et cetera, et cetera. Is that defined enough?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should give credit to where it's due here. The originator of negative directions, as far as I know, is Missy Vinyard, an Alexander teacher in Massachusetts, who runs a training course there. And in her book, how you stand, how you sit, how you move, whatever, Introduction to the Alexander. It's a tediously long title, but it is probably the best introductory book out there on the Alexander Technique. Anyway, she mentions it there, and that's where I got it.
Right.
And basically, as you say, it's instead of affirming something, which is kind of the classical Alexander approach, so I am letting my neck be free, for example, which, if you think about it, assumes that you know how to let it be free.
Correct.
And that assumption, I believe, is often faulty. So a negative direction is not the negative correlate would be, for example, I am not tensing my neck. You're putting it in a negative format, and you're not assuming really anything that isn't true. You do know how to tense your neck, and you know what no means. So you have all the tools you need to apply that. And maybe we won't go in this podcast to the whole issue that sometimes people raise about how ineffective it is to tell people not to think about pink elephants as a reason for not liking negative directions. But I believe there's some pretty good reasons why the very things that make it wrong there make it really helpful for Alexander directions.
Sure.
So we have the kind of classic Alexander directions that can be, as it were, negativized. But you and I have also been doing this a bit, and one of my students has kind of turned me on to this. Have been using negative directions in kind of non-traditional Alexander ways. Could you maybe describe a couple of examples that you've used and what your experience with those is?
Sure. Well, one of the first ones I stumbled onto was I am not holding on to my history. And it just kind of came out of the blue. But I need to back up a little bit, I guess, because part of, as a guitarist, I had performance anxiety, severe, horrible, for the longest time. And AT helped with that and lots of things, meditation, Qigong. But still, there's residual effects. And part of what I found with that, just saying, I'm not that person anymore by not holding on to this history. There was just an element of freedom that came in by playing that night when I first hit on that one. I went on farther to say I'm not a guitarist. You offered up, to experiment with I am not playing the guitar,
right?
While
right.
I was actually playing it, and
right.
And that it's, I don't know what it sounds like, but it's been very freeing for me.
Yeah, I'm not a guitarist. That's a real interesting variant on I'm not playing the guitar, which is, I guess we should probably pause here and say that in terms of negative directions, sort of classic Alexander versions of them, there are really two types. There's the I'm not tensing myself, or I'm not compressing myself, or I'm not tightening my neck, or whatever. And the other type is I'm not doing whatever it is it appears that I'm doing. So if I go out for a walk in the evening, I'll often say to myself, I'm not walking. And immediately I lose a little forward pressure from my chest that I habitually stick into walking. It's a little residue from long ago. And it sounds like, okay, so I'm not playing guitar would be a version of that. But you've taken it a kind of a meta level higher by just saying, hey, I'm not a guitarist.
Right.
and it's fascinating how something like that works. And you might wonder what that means. I mean, what does it mean to say I'm not a guitarist when I've spent years training to be someone who plays the guitar? What would your take on that be? I have some ideas, but I'd be curious what yours is.
Well, the night when I came up with that, it came out of nowhere, and it just had a certain kind of, I guess any instrumentalist will have certain ways of reacting to their instrument, and it stripped just a little bit of that away, and it was just a little moment where it was like I was open to, because I dabble in other percussion, some other things, but I would never call myself anything there. But it took the weight off, I guess.
Maybe it took some of the anxiety of being a guitarist in a public situation.
Right. Because I guess an example I can give you is, see, with the blog, I don't think of myself as a writer. So
right.
I put it out there, and I'm not sensitive about it. Whereas with music, I've spent a lot of time on it. And so the outcome is very important to me. And so by stepping back and saying, I am not a guitarist, and just holding that, it just opened up a space to let go of some emotional baggage or mental baggage. I'm not sure what it is. Physical baggage too. We store things in our bodies.
It's interesting that all of the negative directions in terms of I'm not doing what I obviously appear to be doing, or I am not the thing that I have trained to be, you might think intellectually that could go either way. Like if I'm walking and I say I'm not walking, it could make my walking a lot worse in theory. But I have found, and I'm guessing you have as well, that it never works that way. It's always an improvement. And my take on it is that your body mind kind of gets the bigger message, which would be too long to articulate to it effectively, which is I am not doing whatever negative or useless or harmful aspects of walking that I habitually do. and which is way too long to say to yourself. But I think your body just gets that. Your mind
Right.
body just gets it. And I think when you say I'm not a guitarist, it could be, in theory, that you would have no ability to play the guitar at that point.
Mm.
But in practice, what happens, as you say, is it strips away some baggage that comes with the idea of being, some harmful baggage that comes
Right,
with
right.
the idea of being a guitar player. Yeah, that's interesting. Any other examples where you've applied negative directions to sort of non-traditional Alexander
Well,
ideas?
well, well, one that probably anybody should experiment with was I was frustrated in traffic one day,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly I thought I'm not tensing my neck or collapsing. I'm not sure which one it
Sure.
was,
Yeah.
but I went back to one of Nissy's original things about I am not lying down
Mm-hmm.
while you're doing a lie down.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had played with that the evening or two before. Anyhow, the fun one was I am not driving.
Oh, there you go. That's perfect.
Uh, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not driving. That takes you right out of that anxiety aspect of it, or the
yeah,
irritation aspect,
yeah,
whatever.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it brought me back to myself in a way, but not a serious way.
Right. Right. So, one of the ones that I've played with a bit in a slightly different vein, and again, the inspiration from this was, as I say, one of my students in Canada. Let's say you have a belief system, a sort of metaphysical belief system that the universe is providing, or God, or whatever,
Hmm.
is basically showering you with good stuff, and the only reason you're not expressing it is that you're not open to it, or you're not accepting it, or whatever, right? That
Hmm.
kind of model. And so some affirmations that people might use who are in that, who have that belief system, would be, I'm allowing God's good to express itself in my life, or something along those lines. That's a pretty standard one.
Sure.
I have I've experimented with the negative version of that, which is that I'm not restricting that from coming into the
Mm.
goodness of the universe from coming in, because I know that the thing I am quite capable of doing is restricting it. I know how to restrict,
Of course.
and I do know what no means, or not, and so I'm just saying I'm not affirming something that may not be as possible as it might be because of unconscious habits of mine. I'm going right at the unconscious habits of restricting, which I may not know what they are, but
Right.
I know how to do them,
Hmm.
and I know how to say no to them.
Hmm.
And I found that to be extremely effective. And my student has mentioned that she's explored that a lot in interpersonal relationships, where I can't remember the exact phraseology, but if there was someone she was having a difficulty with, instead of affirming that it's all going to be okay, she would convert that into an appropriate negative self-direction.
Hmm.
So I really think that negative directions have kind of an almost unlimited application.
Yeah, you may be right. I mean, the one I came upon last week, I was at work and I
Hmm.
was waiting for something for someone,
Hmm.
and I was impatient, and I thought about my body and AT, and suddenly I came up with I am not holding myself down.
Right,
And I
right.
was referring more to, there was a heaviness about me, I guess.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but then I thought, okay, well, down, up, forward, back. And I said, oh, I'm not holding myself back. And then I saw that those, while they could just be in that sense of AT, of trying to be forward and up, that they were also a little deeper than that. And,
Hmm.
like you're talking about these things that we do to restrict the good things that come to our lives or self-sabotage in some way.
Yeah, I think that I often use I'm not pulling myself down because I know how to do that.
Right.
I know how to pull myself down pretty well, and I just say no to it. And and I guess in another one I'm guessing that you've explored as well is I'm not breathing,
Yes, I did do
which
that.
is incredibly powerful. Recommend if people want to explore that they do it initially lying down because it's easier to sense the effects of that. You don't have a
Right.
lot of other movement getting in the way. But
Right.
that's an amazingly powerful one.
Yeah, and I mean, immediately my breath went deeper.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Instant.
not
It's
that I,
instant. It's
yeah,
instant. Yeah. In fact, I found the main problem with that direction is the effects are so immediate and so obvious that it's a bit tricky to stay on course with the direction because I get so interested in that
sure.
breathing.
Yeah.
It's the classic Alexander trap. So my suggestion is for that one to experiment with it initially lying down, so you know how powerful it is. But a great place to use it is say when you're walking or running or doing other things where you're not going to directly sense it, so
Mm,
that's not going to pull you away from the intention quite so easily.
right.
So, is there anything else you'd like to say, or any other experience that you've had that would be relevant for our conversation?
Well, I do think it's important to remember that, I mean, we can get hung up in this negative versus positive thing,
Mm-hmm.
language. But I've also found that it's very useful that after this, I am not a guitarist or whatever we might be using, to add back in something, the positive directions also.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to after a while, I did say, okay, I am a guitarist.
Mm-hmm.
Not,
Mm-hmm.
or with the I am not collapsing myself, to also bring back in, I am freeing my neck. I am long and wide.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a blend there that I think seems to be useful to me anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Experiments.
the whole field of self-directing using negative or combinations of negative and positive directions at this point in time, and we're talking in the summer of 2012, is totally up for grabs. I think there are a lot of things that people will discover over the next few months and years. I think it's kind of an open-ended field.
Mm,
And I think it's incredibly exciting. And I really recommend to anyone who's listening to this podcast to just explore them
mm,
and maybe listen to a couple of the earlier podcasts that'll be on the same page to just kind of were I with other people go into a little more detail about negative directions, but I think they are just unbelievably open-ended, and I think almost anyone can use them. I really
sure.
think they're fundamentally easier to use than classic Alexander directions. And what I found is that people figure out new ways to use them and
Mm,
new formulations all the time, as
sure.
you've been doing
Right.
over the
Right.
last few months.
Hmm. And just for your listeners, your podcast where Amy Ward Brimmer, is that her name?
Yes, uh-huh.
She interviewed you. It was that reverse
She
thing.
interviewed me, yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
How
and
about
that
that?
one, you gave a lot of information in that one of how to work with these and play with these and
Right.
emphasized the lightness of.
Right. Well, because you don't want to be pushy about any Alexander directions, negative or positive. You want to be very, very light. But you also want to be specific.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting combination. It's
Right.
a little bit new for some people.
Mm.
Well, maybe this is a good place to bring our conversation to a close.
Okay.
My guest today has been Patrick Smith, who is a long-time student of the Alexander Technique. We should give a little shout-out to your main teacher, David. I can't know how to pronounce his last name.
Well, currently I'm studying with David Jernigan.
David Jernigan, who lives, I believe, in suburban Maryland. Is that right?
Yes, Tacoma Park, Maryland.
Tacoma Park. We'll put a link to David's site by the interview. We'll put a link to your site and also to your blog, to Patrick's blog, where he pretty regularly explores his Alexander journey. Mm-hmm. We'll also put a link to a website where you can find an Alexander teacher in your area. Mm-hmm. Patrick, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome, Robert. Thank you for all you do to spread the word.
Well, thanks. Take care.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye.